He is a man who decodes the complex chessboard of global diplomacy with surgical precision. Please warmly welcome onto the stage Professor of International Relations at King's College London, Shri Harsh V. Pant. Can we please have you on the stage, sir? And steering this conversation today is a veteran who has been decoding the many ideas of India over many decades. Let's welcome our chair, Veer Sanghvi. Good morning. Welcome, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. This is our waking up session, so I hope we'll wake you up. Shall we start with the obvious question, which is that there was a time, say 3 years ago, when we thought India really had everything going for it. We defied the Americans when it came to buying oil from Russia, and the Americans didn't seem to mind. We were looking at Pakistan with contempt. We saw it as a state that had become a pariah, an outlaw, a terror state. Nobody took it seriously. And we thought that because China was the problem for the United States, and we were the obvious bloc that could stand against China, the world needed us. Now, all of that has changed somewhat. I don't think India is still what India always was, but it's changed in terms of global dynamics, in terms of the individuals we're dealing with. Professor, do you think it's changed that dramatically?
First of all, thank you, Veer, and thank you, ABP, for having me here. I would say that, look, things, of course, keep on changing. Change is the only constant. And, of course, international politics has changed so much in the last, just in the last 2 years, that it's very difficult to comprehend what was going on before or think about the trajectories that were there before. But I think a lot of things still stand. India is still seen as a land of opportunity, which we have seen by the quoting of so many world leaders just in the span of last 2 months who have come here and who will be coming here. Canadian Prime Minister will be here today. So I think there is a change everywhere. And everyone is responding to the Trump moment in global politics, Trump 2.0 moment. Trump 1.0 moment, everyone thought we have captured. And I think there, perhaps the assessment in India was that we have understood Mr. Trump, and it would be seamless in Trump 2.0 as well.
And he's our pal, I think, was the general view.
There was a sense that he can be disruptive, but he would not be as disruptive to India as perhaps he would be to other countries. Now, in fact, that has not happened. But these are still early days. We have to still navigate the 3 years of Mr. Trump in office. But most of the underlying factors that you talk about, whether it's the China factor, whether it's the Indo-Pacific, whether it is India's economic rise, India's political stability, India's demographic dividend, India's tech leap, I think all of those things still stand. And India seems to be still playing to that advantage with what we have seen so far. And I think what perhaps this crisis has done is to also awaken us to the need for those much needed reforms. Yeah. Now, we talk of a reform express these days. But I think that has also come as a response to something, which is that these reforms are needed because if India has to protect and project its interests, if India has to make sure that its voice is heard, then those reforms that perhaps should have happened much earlier are being done today. And I think that's why you see a lot of activity as far as India's outreach to the world is concerned and world's outreach to India. So I think Mr. Trump is a factor. He will remain a factor. He's as much of a factor as far as Indian policy is concerned as it is for others. The good thing, I think, there is that we are not a treaty alliance partner to the U.S., so there is a difference. We still can hedge our bets, but I do think that this is a moment where India needs to reflect, and what he has done is he has shaken up some of these lazy assumptions that we had about how things would continue to be what they were in the past, and that perhaps has been the wake-up call, wake-up moment, and that should serve us well and should give us advantage if we continue to use this moment to our advantage.
Let's just talk a little bit about India and America. The calculations we had about why America needed us, I think, surely are still valid. And yet, the way Trump talks, they don't really need us. What do you think happened?
I think American domestic politics changed. And in some ways, there is a shift in domestic politics everywhere. And Trump is a manifestation of something much deeper in America. And some of these tendencies, which we saw, for example, even under Biden administration, they've continued. Such as this idea that, look, we need, that America needs to focus more on its domestic capacity building. So when Mr. Biden came to office, he took a leaf out of Trump 1.2 and he said that, look, my foreign policy is going to be about American middle classes. This is an extraordinary statement for an American president to make in the post-Second World War era, where Americans have always defined their foreign policy in a global context. Right. Here he was saying that, and this was a reflection of the fact that politics was favoring Mr. Trump and his supporters were the voice of a new America. So that new America, I think, is in some ways contrasts with the new India that we talk about. India wants to look out. India wants to engage. India wants to work and see make its partnerships better and more robust. America is pulling back. And this is exactly the opposite of what used to happen in the past. America used to reach out to us and we used to say, no, we are non-aligned. We can't end up in an embrace with you. So I think in that sense, what Indians used to say to the world, that look, our domestic politics is what it is. There is a consensus in India that we don't want to be an alliance partner to anyone. And that still holds, by the way. In a sense, what is happening in America is also a reflection of American domestic politics. Where they are challenging global economic norms, they are challenging globalization, they are challenging how economic interdependencies need to be looked at, and they are challenging their old relationships. I mean, India still is far off, but look at what is happening in Europe. NATO, Japan, Australia, they are trying to figure out what has happened to our treaty alliance partner. So we are in a very different world in that sense. And I think India, because it was in some ways still removed from American mainstream strategic thinking, it still has that strategic space to maneuver. And I think that perhaps is the space that India should continue to hold.
So there's a suggestion in what you're saying that yes, of course it's Trump, but it's more than Trump. It's a change in the American mood. So is this here to stay? Are we going to have to recalibrate our attitude to America?
I think somewhat we should be aware, there is a need for a recalibration in the sense that if America continues, if the Americans and American body politic continues to be driven by some of these inner drivers that Trump has put on the table, then I think the relationships and the engagement with America will have to be transactional. And if we use this word in a manner as if the world was not transactional before, but I think what Mr. Trump has done is he has put his cards on the table. So it's a much more transparent transactionalism, and you have to be prepared for it. That this is the way you'll have to engage with the US. Every other country is doing it, and India cannot be an exception. So because America still retains this, in some ways we talk of bipolarity, multipolarity, but look what Mr. Trump has done. Single-handedly he has shaken up every single assumption around the world order. I think the session here is about the new world order, and that argument inheres in Mr. Trump's vision of what his world is. And so, by and large, I think this is a time when a lot of those challenges and a lot of those assumptions will have to be questioned, and India, given India's growing role, will have to take a different response. See, when during the Cold War, we were marginal to global discourse. We were a weaker country. And when you are a weaker country, you take, you have the luxury of taking recourse to things like morality, international law, international institutions, because they are weapons of the weak in international relations. Today, the world and major powers are talking a language, a discourse of interests, and it's very transparently declared. And I think India today is at a place with its rate of growth, with fastest growing major economy, with this idea that we want to be a rule shaper, not a rule taker. I think all those issues mean that India will have to also speak a language which is going to be much upfront about what its interests are and protect them and push for them, because in the context of Cold War and post-Cold War, the dichotomies don't work. There is a difference here, and I think that India needs to acknowledge.
I agree, but do you think we've handled Trump right? Do you think some of this could have been avoided if we'd handled Trump differently?
I am by and large as an Indian. I think our response to Trump has been very dignified. We have not, if you look at, for example, some of the things that other leaders have done, given him crowns and tiaras of gold and genuflecting before him, I think by and large, India's response has been very cautious. It has been firm about our red lines. We have been firm about our red lines. And I think this clarity that, look, even if you do things, even if you say things which many in India will find abominable, but Indian government will take a measured response. So we have not gone out of our way to annoy him because we know that India and America partnership will have to outlast Mr. Trump. So you cannot be in a situation where you destroy the very basis of that relationship. It's a relationship that is unique. It's top down and bottom up at the same time. And I think that relationship, if it has to continue, then a certain degree of restraint on India's side should pay off in the long term. But certainly in the short to medium term, there are going to be inflection points that India will have to navigate. And I think we are trying to do that to the best of our abilities. Given what has happened to other countries, particularly American allies, I don't think we have done that badly.
Okay. You say that the world is going to be transactional. If you want something from America, you have to give it something in return. And you have to know that unless you do that, nothing is going to happen because this is now open. So explain Pakistan to me. What does Pakistan have to offer America? Why does Trump appear to love Pakistan?
Well, I think if one were being facetious, one could have said, this nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize was one thing that they could have done, that they tried to do. But by and large, I think what the Pakistanis have done is to play to his ego. And Pakistanis are very good at it. They have had a long history of working with the American establishment. And in some ways, India's growth, India's rise, and America's investment in India's rise over the last few decades should be seen as an anomaly. Because by and large, throughout the Cold War, our experience with the US has been that with Pakistan, they have had a very upfront relationship, a very deep relationship. So the bureaucracies are connected.
I think people forget the stand America took in 71
war. So yes, I mean, this is, and these are ultra realists, Kissinger and Nixon. And Pakistan's role in opening China to the US. I mean, these are phenomenal shifts that happened in American foreign policy thanks to Pakistan. So there is certainly a historical memory there that can be operated, and the bureaucracies will fall in, state and the Department of State, War, which is now called Pentagon, will fall in line. But I think India, I don't think has much to worry on that front, partly because if you have the kind of economic disparity between India and Pakistan that exists today, then ultimately India's economic weight would speak out for itself. And in that sense, holding certain red lines as far as India is concerned has been good for India. Now, if you think of Operation Pahalgam, initially all the hullabaloo about how the narrative war is being won by Pakistan, if you see how the narrative is being shaped today and how the realities are coming out today, it's very clear that India's performance in Operation Sindoor was quite good. And in some ways, it put Pakistan on the defensive. Now, that I think one of our chiefs said that ultimately in wars, results have to be shown on the ground, not in the narrative engagement, which in some ways is a reflection that today, Pakistan, with all the challenges that it faces, has to focus on Afghanistan. So, what is happening in the last 2 days in Afghanistan, on the Afghanistan-Pakistan frontier, is a reflection that Pakistan has too many challenges, and it has not been able to grapple with those challenges effectively. And as a result, India can be rest assured that the opportunity that India presents will far outlast the challenge that Pakistan has become to the regional and global order. And I think in some ways that should be our policy, that let us see how this pans out.
Do you think we pay too much attention to Pakistan
Absolutely.
as Indians?
Absolutely.
We're a little too obsessed by them.
Absolutely.
And they're globally a bit of an irrelevance. It's just unfortunate we have them as a neighbor.
It is very, I think our focus should be, China, China, China. And I think our focus, unfortunately, in the large part of public discourse is Pakistan.
Yeah.
And that takes away from the real challenge that India faces. And this is both positive and negative. Positive insofar as the leaps, you had a session with the Chinese scholar yesterday, and the kinds of technological advancement that China has made should be a lesson for us. The kind of investments they have made in higher education should be a lesson for us. The kind of, looking inwards and building domestic resilience and capacity should be a lesson for us. And we should learn and move on, take a measure of what China is up to. Rather, our focus all the time is on Pakistan and Pakistan's ability to create nuisance. Still, it weighs too much on India. So I think this idea that if you make Pakistan relatively redundant in your foreign policy, that certainly should be the mantra and that should be the guiding principle of Indian foreign policy, because that ultimately will yield us dividends, which I think are in sync with this idea that India should emerge as a significant power or a developed country by 2047, if that is something that we strive to do.
But our obsession with Pakistan suits China, right? We are obsessed with the mosquito when there's a tiger crouching at our doorstep.
Absolutely. I think this idea that from the very beginning that China had, that look, India should be boxed in as a South Asian country. And now we have ourselves to blame for boxing ourselves in South Asia because we don't want to get out of this mindset. I think things have changed. There is a realization that India now is not simply a South Asian country, but an Indo-Pacific country. That in itself gives a centrality to India in the maritime and the regional discourse, which perhaps a South Asian, Indian Ocean power by itself would not have done. So I think there is a shift happening. There is a recognition that Chinese capabilities, Chinese growth is a real challenge, which we have to acknowledge and we have to work with in some ways. But certainly, if for China, nothing suits it more than India getting bogged down in this India-Pakistan binary. And therefore, I think the damage that Mr. Trump has done is to bring Pakistan back in the discourse. And in some ways, not fully, but in some ways, bringing the India-Pakistan hyphenation back, which may or may not last, but this damage from India's perspective has been somewhat extraordinary.
Let's talk, enough time on Pakistan. Let's talk about China. You're dealing with a country that is economically much stronger than you, technologically more advanced than you are. How do you cope? What do you do?
I think that one is that, look, there is no alternative to building domestic capacity and domestic resilience. Internal capacity building, internal reforms, whether it's military, diplomatic, human resource, or capability, that we really cannot outsource to anyone, and that should be the number one priority. Even as we try to leverage China, for example, because China is a big economic power, it is your neighbor, it is one of our largest trading partners. So in some ways, we have to leverage that. We have to ensure that China India continues to be invested in Chinese growth story and vice versa. But I think there are certain critical sectors where India needs internal resilience. Okay. And those cannot be outsourced to Chinese, and we can't be over-dependent on China. It came to us much late, this realization. When COVID happened, for example, the whole pharmaceutical industry was seen as dependent on Chinese APIs. So I think that problem certainly still exists. But the other, I think, aspect is that we need to be more upfront about the kind of partnerships we need. Because
give me an example.
I think US is a good example. The West is a good example. And I think this India-EU partnership, which it took us 2 decades to finalize the trade deal. Now, of course, there are good reasons why it happened, when it happened. But in a sense, the partnership with the West is going to be pivotal in building domestic capacity in the country. But because there is also Cold War hangover in India, where anything to do with West is seen as bad. So, during the Cold War, non-alignment was largely negative, that we will not partner with the West. Today, I think, in some ways, when we say multi-alignment, for example, this is a more upfront acknowledgement that without partnerships, we cannot build domestic capacities and domestic resilience. And therefore, whether it is a partnership with EU or whether it is a partnership with Russia on critical sectors like energy and defense, those partnerships will have to be will have to be created and curated and nurtured. But I think ultimately there should be an acknowledgement that those partnerships will remain key to building those capacities that we need to confront or take on China with. After all, China did exactly the same. If you go back to Chinese history, Cold War history, what did China do? It was a partner of the Soviet Union. It conveniently moved, we were talking about Nixon and Kissinger, conveniently moved to the US. And then now America blames China for buying technologies, stealing technologies, IP protection, etc. I think in some ways being nimble is perhaps very underrated. Ideological fixation cannot be the motto in any foreign policy. And therefore, the more partnerships we have, it gives us greater leverage in managing some of the challenges, but also in building critical elements in managing China. Because without that, I think if you think that everything can be done on our own, that certainly is not something that will allow us to map out the China challenge in the near future.
I've heard people in the Foreign Office say over the years that the West is, effectively a bloc. The Americans take the lead and the rest of NATO follows. Now, for once, that's not true any longer. So you think that's an opportunity for India?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of the things that we are witnessing these days with Europe and the momentum in Europe that has happened, the first Trump administration made Europe realize that they need to think of life beyond Washington. And I think the second Trump administration made it very clear that Europe needs to act. And I think they've started finally acting like the kind of capabilities that they have. It will take them a lot of time. When they say today that we will build domestic defense capabilities, it's a long way off given how far they have come. So I think in that sense, it is going to be a slow process. But it is important for Europe, and it is good for India that we have a Europe that is more strategically autonomous, that is not taking its cue from Washington, and that can decide foreign policy based on merits of what the requirements are at the moment. And therefore, we have seen this uptick in India-EU relationship. And that is also true, by the way, in India-Canada relationship. Yep. From Justin Trudeau to Mark Carney, if you see the change and the shift, a lot of it has to do with Mr. Trump and what he's trying to do in the Western Hemisphere. So his visit today to India and the way he has shifted the discourse on India-Canada relationship is a tribute perhaps to Mr. Trump. So we owe him some gratitude also in terms of how things have changed in various world capitals in India's favor.
Now, you've said that while the ascension of Mr. Trump to the presidency is in some ways a reverse for India because of the manner in which he functions, because of his mysterious affection for Pakistan. But it's also a huge opportunity for us because everybody in the world is worried about him and people are taking us more seriously and are looking to us in the future. Is that fair?
I think so. I think, sometimes we underestimate ourselves. And we think that, look, because our relationship with the US is going through a particular phase, there is Pakistan, there is trade, there is all kinds of statements coming out, there is the issue of immigration, we don't have any cards to play. But I think this is a moment for India. If we are upfront about what we want from the world, I think the world is willing to reciprocate because everyone is in the same boat. Everyone is recalibrating. Everyone is looking at a Washington that is more inward-looking, that is not there as a security provider, as an economic guarantor that it used to be. So in some ways, it provides an opportunity, and in some cases, for example, in the Indo-Pacific or in Europe, you see a number of partnerships developing which were inconceivable a few years back. So
give me an example.
So I think in the context of Indo-Pacific, if you see India, Australia, Japan, Korea, all these countries where India was present, but India was not looking at these relationships strategically. Similarly with Europe, we were present. I mean, look at Germany. I mean, German Chancellor's visit earlier this year to India is a reflection of what the changes that are undergoing in Germany. Germany wants to become a strategic player. They want to become a geopolitical player. They had given all that up after Second World War for good reasons. Now that they are waking up to their strategic potential, it also gives India an opportunity to recalibrate, to work with Germany, for example, on their immense defense capabilities. The labor mobility pact that India is signing allows us to look beyond the US. Most of our youth, most of our middle classes in India used to look at America as the final frontier. Today, the world is opening up and they are embracing India from Japan to Europe to Germany to Canada. Labor mobility is a big deal. Yeah. And I think in that sense, the texture of our strategic partnerships is changing from economics and trade to also labor and tech. And I think these are the drivers of future geopolitics, and this should position India well in a landscape where demography is going to be a problem, where tech is going to be a problem, tech inequality is going to be a problem, and where talent is going to be in short supply. So I think in those senses, India provides certain assets which very few other countries do, and India is also one of the few countries that can bridge. It's very interesting if you see how many countries are there in the world that are members of Quad and that are members of BRICS. I mean, it's a very unique combination that you have, and the world apart, continues to buy it. I mean, they are not pressurizing us to say, look, you have to get out of BRICS if you want to deal with Europe, or you have to get out of Quad if you want to deal with BRICS. I think the world recognizes that India offers something unique. Indian proposition is unique, and if that uniqueness can be converted into a strategic advantage, then this is India's moment.
Okay, so that gives me the perfect cue for the sort of question that anchors like asking and academics hate answering, which is, you're saying you have a perfect cue. If they made you foreign minister tomorrow, what are the 3 things you would do?
Well,
I told you it's not the kind of question.
No, that's a very, very... no, I think, in some ways, the challenge for India remains, first of all, how do we conceptualize China in our foreign policy?
Okay.
And I think, in any case, if I'm an academic writing a book on Indian foreign policy, it's striking how everything revolves around China.
Yeah.
You take any issue, from economics to trade to supply chains to technology to our partnerships, you will have to have a section which will start the China problem. So in a sense, getting China right is perhaps the biggest issue in front of India. Now, what does right mean? It means that you continue to work with China wherever possible, but also you have to build those critical capacities that will not make you over-dependent on China. Where China cannot come to us and say, look, I'm turning off these rare earths, and therefore you have to behave in this manner.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you, though I asked you through. You've suggested throughout, and we haven't discussed this fully, you're saying that the answer to handling China is not just looking outwards, it's looking inwards. That the reason they are where they are is because they made the right reforms in higher education, in technology, in being not so dependent on the world. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. I think all power flows from the domestic rather than external. I mean, the rest of the world can help us. Yeah. But ultimately, we have to find our own source of our strategic aspiration, and that source exists inside India, not outside India.
So that would be the first thing you would do. I'm going to sort of, because you're running out of time, suggest the second thing you would do would be to recognize that the nature of American foreign policy is more and more influenced by domestic policy, and it's therefore going to be more openly transactional, so deal with it.
Yes, I think and not only America, I think the rest of the world is moving in a direction where everyone wants to talk a language of power and interest. And I think we should be more comfortable in talking about power and interest, which we have not been. We are slightly uncomfortable when it comes to power. I know previous ministers have said that, look, we are very uncomfortable when it comes to hard power. So I think in some ways, as the nature of the world changes, we have to continue to change. And finally, since you asked the third one, I think let's make Pakistan irrelevant in our foreign policy by not talking about it constantly.
Yeah, what happens if they launch a terrorist attack? We can't ignore them.
Then we respond, but I think it can't be the driving principle of Indian foreign policy that we have to tackle. You can create a deterrence model vis-a-vis China, and that vis-a-vis Pakistan, and I think that should take care of Pakistan for the foreseeable future, because if you get distracted with Pakistan, then I think a lot of the things that you want to build and that you want to curate and create in India, that will certainly become a sideshow, which should not happen.
So look beyond Pakistan, handle China, accept that foreign policy in the world has changed, and finally treat this whole Trump thing as an opportunity, because the rest of the world is now more interested in India?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for summing it up so nicely.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
ABP Ananda, এগিয়ে থাকে, এগিয়ে রাখে।